Hello Plymouth, Luke Pollard here. I'm running for re-election as your Member of Parliament. In 2017, I made 10 pledges on polling day about what I would do if you elected me as your Member of Parliament. I want to give you an update on those 10 pledges so you can see that I've delivered against each and every one of them. My first pledge was to always put Plymouth first. I'll always put Plymouth first. Plymouth's my home. It's where I was born and where I live. And I've relentlessly done this. I've spoken over 200 times in Parliament. That's 7 times more than the 2 Tories put together for our city, because I think if we're being ignored in Westminster, our unfair deal will continue. My second pledge was to oppose Tory police cuts. I'll fight Tory cuts to the police. That's seen 20,000 police officers sacked by the Tories since 2010. And I've done that. In the House of Commons, I've spoken up about the 626 police officers that the Tories have cut from Devon and Cornwall Police. I want to see more experienced police officers on our streets. And frankly, with rising crime, especially rising violent crime, we need those experienced police officers more than ever before. My third pledge was to stand up for our armed forces. I'll stand up for our military, renew Trident, and fight Tory cuts to our armed forces. And I've done that. I've opposed the Tory cuts to our warships in Devonport. I've led the campaign to base the new frigates in Devonport. The new Type 26s are coming. Sadly, we lost HMS Ocean, sold off by the Tories, but we won the campaign to keep Albion and Bulwark in Devonport. I'm campaigning to have the submarines recycled and for all our armed forces to get a 5% pay rise, reversing the real terms pay cuts they've had under the Conservatives. My fourth pledge was to fight for a good Brexit deal for Plymouth. I'll fight for the best Brexit deal for Plymouth, and that's what I've been doing. Frankly, Brexit is a mess, and Theresa May's deal and Boris Johnson's deal will lose jobs for people in our city. I'm not prepared to vote for a deal that makes Plymouth poorer. That's why I've been campaigning for a public vote. MPs aren't going to agree on Brexit, and I don't think a general election will get Brexit sorted. If a 3-word soundbite could get Brexit sorted, I think that would have happened already, and I think you know that as well. My fifth pledge was to oppose school cuts. I'll fight Tory school cuts. That's seeing nearly every single school in Plymouth lose teachers. And I've been doing that time and time again. Each one of our children's worth £300 less than the national average under the Conservatives, and that's simply not good enough. Our kids aren't worth less than any other child around the country. That's why I've been campaigning to get us our fair share of funding, and our Labour commitment is to raise spending in Devon and Cornwall to the national average. My next pledge was to make sure that we were opposing Tory privatisation of our NHS. I'll fight Tory cuts and privatisations to our NHS and help pay all our NHS staff properly. That's exactly what I've done. Our NHS staff and those people that work in social care are brilliant. But frankly, there's not enough of them, and they're being made to work too hard by a government that's intent on privatising NHS services. We're seeing NHS services already be privatised at Derriford, and we're seeing far too many vacancies that aren't being filled. We know there's a GP crisis in Plymouth, and it's getting harder to see your GP or an NHS dentist. I've been campaigning to reverse that situation, to make sure we have the investment in our primary care and our NHS that we deserve as a city. My seventh pledge was to campaign for better transport for Plymouth. I'll fight for better transport for Plymouth. The M5 extended to the Tamar Bridge, a reopened airport, a new cruise terminal at Millbay, and a fast and resilient railway. And I've done precisely that. Where that's extending the M5 from Exeter to the Tamar Bridge, but making sure that it's only used by electric vehicles, getting rid of polluting petrol and dirty diesel engines, where it's about supporting the reopening of Plymouth Airport. Again, for electric aviation, let's be the test bed, the centre of the new research and deployment of electric aviation, or a new cruise terminal at Millbay, especially with Mayflower 400 next year, or making sure that our railway is fast and resilient with more trains on the cross-country franchise, and actions to make sure that fares are more affordable and that we get the train service that we deserve. My eighth pledge was vote to scrap tuition fees. I'll vote to scrap tuition fees, reintroduce the maintenance grant, and make sure further education is funded properly. Sadly, the Tories have opposed this each and every way, so we haven't had a vote on that. But I'm proud to be standing on a platform now that wants to see tuition fees scrapped, make sure we're getting a fair funding for our brilliant FE college here in Plymouth, and ensure that people can reskill throughout their entire lifetimes. That's going to be even more essential with globalisation, automation, and the big challenges of the 21st century. We can't see people in Plymouth left behind with poor education funding. My ninth pledge was to oppose fox hunting. I'll oppose the return of fox hunting, and I've done that as a shadow Environment Minister, I've made the case for better 21st century animal welfare that not only includes strengthening the fox hunting ban, but ending the cruel badger cull, making sure we're protecting our fragile habitats and hitting net zero carbon emissions, not by a far off date in the 2050s, but by 2030. And my last pledge was to keep the triple lock on pensions. And finally, I'll vote to keep the triple lock on pensions and the winter fuel allowance, and I'll fight Theresa May's cruel dementia tax. I've done all those things. Frankly, the Conservatives should be ashamed of themselves for breaking their promise that they made to the over 75s when they said they'd keep their free TV licence, only to take that away from them. Labour would make sure that our over 75s keep their free TV licence. I'm pledged to keep the triple lock and make sure that we're dealing with so many of our pensioners that not only are in poverty, but for far too many of them are on their own. Over the last 2.5 years, I've been standing up for Plymouth. I've been making the case that we need to get our fair share. This election is going to be really close on Thursday, and that's why I need your support to be re-elected so I can continue the campaign to get Plymouth our fair share and make sure that whoever is in number 10, that Plymouth's voice is heard loud and clear in Westminster. Thanks very much. Vote Labour. Vote Luke. Cheers.